This next part, I need to be extraordinarily careful about choosing my words, for some reasons which I've already touched upon. Also, because there was a mass shooting in Australia. As a result of that, changes in the laws may render what I'm about to say to be a hate crime and restrict my free speech rights to say it. This only makes the topic far more relevant. Anti-Zionism is not the same as anti-Semitism. Criticizing Israel is not the same as hating Jews, but Israel wants you to think that it is. Israel has weaponized identity politics by shielding themselves with their Judaism and attacking critics with accusations of anti-Semitism, which they are lobbying other nations to make hate crimes, and Australian governments seem more than willing to oblige. Zionism is the political project of having a Jewish ethno-state, the State of Israel. Israel believes that because they cannot separate their Judaism from their statehood, then nobody else can either. Therefore, any criticism of their state is just closeted bigotry. And just like how white ethno-state Australia gave superior rights to white people, Israel gives superior rights to Jewish people. And of course they would. They proclaim themselves to be God's chosen people. How could anyone think that and believe anyone else was equal to you? It's not just that Israel sees Palestinians as human animals. They see everyone else as being lesser than them. Even Australians are less human than they are. Israel is a racist, Jewish supremacist country. If you are not Jewish, you are Goyim. There's even hierarchies amongst the Jewish populations of Israel, with ultra-Orthodox Jews at the top being the only ones exempt from the country's mandatory military service. If you believe in the equality of all human beings, then you are an anti-Semite, by Israeli logic. Now I need to make myself absolutely clear here. I am not an anti-Semite, although I would undoubtedly be accused of being one for my views on Israel. I don't hate Jews. I don't hate anyone. I have no room in my heart for hate. Hatred is an action. It takes energy to maintain, and I refuse to waste any part of my life hating anyone else. That doesn't mean I will stay silent to avoid the accusation, though, especially when a foreign nation is actively meddling in my nation's domestic affairs. That's a big no-no in international relations. We're supposed to respect each other's sovereignty. But what law of man would ever apply to the chosen of God? Now, anti-Semitism is on the rise worldwide, and the reason is because of Israel, which stems from their government's response to the October 7th terrorist attack. It's no wonder Israel has committed war crimes against an enclosed and imprisoned civilian population in Gaza, and even the mildest form of criticism is vehemently rejected as anti-Semitism. By shielding themselves with their religion, they've effectively demonized their own religion and anyone who follows it. If you bludgeon people over their head with the symbol of your religion, they will learn to hate it. Australia has not been immune to the rise of anti-Semitism, which doesn't really make sense to me. It's not our culture. Sure, we have a history of racism, but that has been mainly directed at Aboriginals and Asians, and the Chinese in particular. But anti-Semitism? No, it's not us. But we have had false flag attacks, and more shit keeps happening while I work on this video. There was the caravan terror plot, which turned out to be a hoax. The anti-Semitic eggings that was just a teenage prank and no Jewish people were even involved. A woman was charged with an anti-Semitic hate crime for accidentally pocket dialing a Jewish person and leaving an empty voicemail. Is literally saying nothing an anti-Semitic hate crime now? But there was the Melbourne synagogue that got firebombed, which was allegedly orchestrated by Iran. But if Iran hates Israel, why attack a synagogue in Australia? Jewish Australians haven't launched missiles at Iran. Part of the intent of Israeli propaganda is to convince you that their enemies are your enemies too. All of this reeks to me of foreign interference, most likely from a nation obsessed with weaponizing anti-Semitism. Then we had the Bondi Beach mass shooting, a horrible tragedy. It was the biggest mass shooting in Australia since the Port Arthur massacre in 1996, which changed Australian culture towards guns. We didn't have a big gun culture before, but we actively rejected it after. Anti-Semitism is not Australian culture, it's Israel's. Mass shootings are not Australian culture, it's America's. So why did Australia have an anti-Semitic mass shooting? It reeks of foreign interference. But who benefits from it? Who will gain special protections from proposed legislative changes? Think it won't happen? It's already begun. The Israeli Ministry for Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism has claimed that social media increases anti-Semitic sentiments. They don't specify how, but it's probably from the IDF soldiers filming and uploading themselves committing war crimes. Context is important. Australia late last year implemented a ban on social media for users under 16 years old, under the guise of protecting them from cyberbullying. By doing that, they're attempting to limit under 16s to information that comes from the legacy media and their long-held pro-Israel narrative. It's social engineering by a foreign nation. I don't think that's the only reason for the ban. There's also online age verification used for data harvesting and tracking. There are many contributing factors, and none of them are actually for the public good. If Australia codifies the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism into our laws, then criticizing Israel could become a crime. We don't have a Bill of Rights. We don't have those protections to our right of free speech. We have common law protections, which can be legislated away or restricted. Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza, and Australian governments are looking to make it illegal to point that out. The Queensland government has already banned phrases like globalise the intifada and from the river to the sea. That doesn't protect Jews from harm, it protects Israel from accountability. If anything, it foments anti-Semitism through the resentment of giving one group of people superior rights over all others. We don't have the protected right to free speech, but Israel is being given the legal right to not be offended. What freedoms do we have if it becomes a crime to hurt someone's feelings? Australia's climate is not suitable for snowflakes. I'll give you some examples of how these new laws might work based on how Zionists are shaping the moderation of social media sites. If you say, I am a proud Zionist, that's okay. If you say, you are a proud Zionist, well, that could be considered anti-Semitic hate speech. You wouldn't be allowed to say, Israel is committing a genocide in Palestine, but you would be allowed to say, Israel should genocide the Palestinians. Calling out a genocide is hate speech, but endorsing a genocide isn't. That makes sense, right? Saying this looks like Zionist indoctrination would be anti-Semitic hate speech, so you better not say that. In the wake of the Bondi Beach shooting, we've seen some of the best responses Australians are capable of, and also some of the worst. Australians came together to celebrate the hero Ahmed al-Ahmed. I apologise if I've mispronounced your name, I've heard many variations of it. He is the man who heroically disarmed one of the shooters, risking his own life to protect others. I believe his actions embody Australian culture in a way that few of us could ever live up to. He deserves every reward he's given. He even took money from the Murdoch media for an interview and then pulled out. Fuck yes! Australian of the Year, Australian of the Decade! But wait, hold on. We have a new hero of Bondi. 10 News Plus of the Channel 10 network, owned by American billionaire and Zionist Larry Ellison, have found the true hero of Bondi. An American rabbi. This man who helped organize the event that was attacked aided a wounded police officer, and then asked the officer for their gun so that he could fire back at the shooters. Just imagine the heroic scene of this rabbi bravely firing back to protect his people. You'll have to imagine it because it didn't happen. The police officer didn't give their firearm to a civilian, which would have caused an absolute shitstorm if they did, but ignore that dose of reality. Just focus on the heroism of an American asking for a gun and how that could have saved the day if it had happened. Ignore that Muslim guy who acted without a gun, like an animal. Remember the heroism of the rabbi who would have acted if they had a gun. Oh, and his name in Hebrew translates to lion. Keep that in mind. Now, I have no issue with this guy. He is a survivor and hasn't claimed to be a hero. It's Israeli propaganda, and it's delivered to us thanks to these Muppets. But we also saw the political blame game. Then Liberal opposition leader Susan Lee blamed Labour Prime Minister Anthony Albanese for failing to keep Jewish Australians safe, which is utterly disgusting. After Port Arthur, the political parties put aside their differences to work together and allow the nation to mourn. But I guess that was different. You can't blame Labour for an atrocity that happened under Liberal Prime Minister John Howard. Is that it? There were no political points to score there? Or is this a symptom of the Trumpian decline of political standards? Then you have former Liberal MP and election loser Josh Frydenberg, who fortuitously just remembered he was Jewish, and is now trying to relaunch his political career by decrying that Australia is the lucky country no more. Do those crocodile tears make you feel guilty enough to vote for him again? There has subsequently been a call for a royal commission into anti-Semitism, which I would ordinarily welcome, but it's going to be hamstrung. Its scope will be limited to never investigate Israel or its involvement in the rise of anti-Semitism. It will only be used to crack down on the free expression of anti-Israeli sentiment. We had a failed referendum on changing the constitution to give Aboriginals a voice to Parliament, which was just a way for them to express their grievances and be heard. Not only did we collectively not let them have that right, but now we're looking at letting Israel take away our voice too, our right to express grievances. If saying nothing can get you charged with an anti-Semitic hate crime, imagine what would happen if you actually said something critical of Israel. It's at this point I really need to be clear and specify that when I criticize Israel, I'm typically referring to the Israeli government, although sometimes it is the people of Israel too, as they voted for and support the government. What I'm not doing is using Israel as a code word for anti-Semitic hatred of Jewish people. The problem is not Jewish people, it's Israel. But Israel will commit acts that conform to the worst stereotypes of Jewish people just to accuse people of anti-Semitic stereotypes when it's pointed out. Oh, so you're saying that Israelis are sneaky and duplicitous, like the stereotype of a certain people? That's how they silence dissent. Weaponized identity politics. You're either a Zionist or you're an anti-Semite. Well, I'm neither, and I refuse to play this game. Israel is not the perpetual victim that the legacy media and Israeli propaganda wants us to believe. Israel is deceptive. Israeli propaganda loves the symbolism of lions. Their soldiers roared like lions after the October 7th attack, which is appropriate because when I see Israeli propaganda, I immediately think lion. Israeli politicians, like most others, lie frequently. None more blatantly than indicted war criminal Benjamin Bibi Baby Butcher Netanyahu, the poster child for punchable faces. One of their favorite lies is about dead babies. Why? Because it's horrific. They want you to be horrified by their enemies so that they convince you that they are your enemies too, so that any action they take against a mutual enemy can be justified. They lied about Hamas beheading babies on October 7th They lied about Iraqis killing babies when Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990. Yet Israel will bomb women, children, and babies themselves. The IDF tortured a baby by burning him with cigarettes to extort a confession from his father. They even had a program called Where's Daddy, which used AI to track suspected Hamas members until they got home to their families, and then they would bomb the house and kill everyone there. They don't just bomb buildings into dust, they also dig up the roads as well to sabotage any attempt at the society recovering, so the inhabitants have no choice but to leave and then they can steal the land. They accuse Hamas of using Palestinians as human shields, as though that then justifies killing them. But the IDF uses Palestinians as human shields too. They strip them down to their underwear and send them into buildings they think are occupied or booby-trapped, essentially sending them to their deaths. Not only do Israelis rape Palestinian prisoners, but they protested for their right to rape them too. They have allegedly even used dogs to rape prisoners. Now, I say allegedly because the evidence is just the testimony of eyewitnesses and victims. And you can't just believe victims. You have to give the alleged perpetrators the right to investigate themselves and determine their own innocence. Because that's how criminal investigations work. They don't see Palestinians as human beings, which is how they justify raping, killing, and torturing them. They just legalized the death penalty, but only for Palestinians. Could you imagine if Australia legalized the death penalty, but only for Aboriginals? Why is it okay for Israel? If you think the state-sponsored murder of a single ethnicity is inhuman, I suggest you look up the Hannibal Directive. Israel will kill their own people to keep them from being taken as hostages. Not because the treatment of hostages is so bad that death is preferable, but because they don't want to negotiate for their release. 100 Palestinian prisoners for one IDF soldier? That's a bad exchange rate. Best to just kill your own people. Most moral army on the planet? My ass. If they're willing to kill their own people for a negotiation strategy, do you think they would hesitate to kill Australians for propaganda purposes? The Israeli strike on the World Central Kitchen convoy that killed Zomi Frankum was no accident. It was a deliberate effort to terrorize aid workers into leaving Gaza so that more Palestinians would starve. The first time a hospital in Gaza was hit, Israel pleaded their innocence. It wasn't them, it was Hamas. Hamas accidentally hit their own side. They conveniently even had an apparent audio recording of Hamas confessing to it. They faced no consequences for it and have subsequently bombed every hospital in Gaza. The lack of accountability only leads to further escalation. They have no qualms about lying to us because they believe they are better than us. To God's chosen people, we will always be lesser than them. One of the ways they hide their deception is through language. The language they use determines their target audience. If they speak English, then their audience is America and, by extension, the West. It's usually just a show. If they speak Hebrew, then they are speaking to Israelis and they will be a lot more honest. This is why a lot of media organizations and even some social media sites will not report or translate what is said in Hebrew. Because if people knew what Israelis were actually saying, they would realize that they are not like us and they would turn against Israel, which they would define as anti-Semitism. Israel has killed record numbers of journalists in Gaza because they don't want the outside world to know what they're doing. They need us to believe their plausible deniability until the genocide is complete, because by then, it's too late. It's around about this time that people would ask the accusatory question, does Israel have a right to exist? Well, no, it doesn't. No nation on earth has a right to exist. Not Israel, not Australia, not the USA. Nations and governments are human creations. They have no divine or natural right to exist. What they do have is responsibilities. Responsibilities to protect the people within their borders, to uphold their domestic laws, and to operate within international law. And if they don't do that, then other nations have the responsibility to boycott, divest, and sanction them until they comply. BDS contributed to ending apartheid in South Africa, which is why Israel is so viciously opposed to it. BDS leads to greater equality, and that's why Israel claims it's anti Semitic. Jewish people were the primary victim of the Holocaust. 11 million people were murdered, 6 million of those were Jewish. The other people were gay, trans, disabled, non white, anyone on the fringe that didn't fit the Aryan ideal. It was an industrialized genocide. It was so shocking that the world collectively said, never again. Never again will we allow this to happen to anyone. It is a crime against all of us. But we have failed to adhere to that. For Israel, though, never again seems to mean never again will anyone discriminate against Jews. They behave like that was the true crime, and they use that grievance to avoid any accountability. After World War II, the Nuremberg trials held the Nazis accountable for their crimes. Just following orders was not an excuse. There were Nazi officers who fled to South America and spent the rest of their lives hiding in fear of being found out. That's not justice, but it is a measure of accountability. We don't seem to even have that anymore. It seems like the crimes committed by one administration are forgiven or overlooked by the next. That needs to change. There needs to be consequences, or the cycles of violence will never end. Boycott, divest, and sanction Israel.